Okay, so in this video we'll be continuing from our last video where we actually created up our Cassandra instance on Docker, and we've connected to it here locally on the command prompt right here. So we'll go ahead and get started by getting Visual Studio up and running and getting our Web API created and just getting our basic data coming through the Web API. But first, let's go ahead and just make sure we test here that our cluster is still up and running. It looks like it's running good, so we're able to test it from the prompt and behind here. So I'll go ahead and minimize these and go ahead and start Visual Studio. Okay, so what we're going to want to do here is just go ahead and start a new project. I'm using a Visual Studio 2015, but should work on 2013 as well. I'm not sure about beyond that. So let's go ahead and start a new C# project. Let's do it in. We're going to start an ASP web application, and we're going to call it blog Cassandra blog demo. Cassandra blog demo, and let's go ahead and hit create directory for solution, and let's go ahead and hit OK. Then here we're just going to select Web API, and we're not going to add any unit tests, and we're just going to put no authentication on it. So that looks good. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. So while this is loading, just want to go ahead and say that remind if you're watching the last video that I actually have an example of this running up on my GitHub page. If you want to visit it, you can see I'm doing kind of the same thing, just a um, little bit more that I'm doing on there, because it would take a long time to put it onto a video. So this is just a fraction of what I'm doing on this GitHub project. So if you want to check it out, feel free. So we'll go ahead and we're still waiting for Visual Studio to load this first project. I actually just ran an update on it, so it's probably a little bit slow because of that reason. Okay, so there you go. We're up and running on this. So I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup before we get started on this project. Just get rid of some things I know we're not going to need. So let's go ahead and delete a couple folders here, since we're just going to be using it as a RESTful API. You don't have to do this. It's just a preference on my end here. So we're not going to have any UI components. We can delete all these. Oops, and it looks like I might have clicked something I didn't want to, so we'll just go ahead and let that run. Shouldn't affect anything, but we'll just remove these dependencies a little bit later. So the only thing we either need to get rid of is these two folders here. We don't need scripts or views. Okay, so there you go. We've cleaned that up. Keep it simple. So the first thing we're going to want to do here, so that we can connect to our Cassandra clusters, the first thing we want to do is we're going to want to create a model. Okay, so we're going to go in here, we're going to create a post model. Okay, so if you remember going back here to our, looks like we need something for a post ID, a body, a title, and an updated. So let's go ahead and create an ID field. This will be a type GUID. It's an ID. Let's create string title, and we'll just copy this, and we'll call this will be the body. The last one was just a date. will just be, I think it was last updated. Okay, so they don't have to match up. You can actually, I'll show you where you can actually map this a little bit later. So there you go. We have a basic, basic pogo for post, and all we need to do now is now do a mapping for it. So what we're going to want to do in here is we're going to go ahead and create another class file here, just on the root is where I'm going to do it. I'm going to call it Cassandra mappings. Okay, so that's loaded. So in order to do these registrations, first thing we're going to want to do is, well, actually before we do any of this, we need to install the driver we're going to need. So let's go to NuGet, and let's go to Browse, and we're going to want to look for this Cassandra C# driver right here that I have. Let's go ahead and do a search for it. Okay, so it looks like it's gone ahead and found it. So we're going to want to select the one here by data stacks. Let's go ahead and install that. Okay, so it looks like it's went ahead and installed the package. Great. So we'll go ahead and close NuGet down. So what we need to do here though is we need to go and derive this Cassandra mappings class from a base class actually provided by DataStax here. So it will be Cassandra mapping, then it will be mappings, I believe. Yeah, mappings. There we go. So now that we have that, what we can do is we can run the constructor. What we can do is we can actually do a mapping in here in the constructor. So we can do for the post that we just created right here, we want to go ahead and tell it, give it some detail it's going to need. So let's go right here. Let's go and say the table name for this post would going to actually be, I believe it's posts. Let me double check that real quick. Yes, it is post plural. Then we're going to want to do the partition key. So the partition key for this is, let's see, we've made it the ID. And then we're going to go ahead now and specify the columns that we have. So let's see what we can do. We have to do each one individually. Now, if they match up perfectly, you don't have to do it, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyways. We'll say the ID maps to ID, simply column. Let's see, this one is will be for the title. And I'll show an example where you can change this a little bit. I'll make one for body, and we'll just copy this, and we'll do it for last updated. Okay, so if you actually had a property here, I pretty much followed the convention. But if, like, let's say you wanted to call this ID, but in the database you stored it as subject or whatever, you could go ahead and actually give it another value here, where you do like you can do I believe here would be with name. There you go, with name. So you could go ahead and say, this is not title, it's maybe it was titles or whatever. You could go ahead if it doesn't map perfectly on the name. So there you go, we have a mapping, and this is all we have. We only have one table, but now we're going to be able to have this strongly typed in our code, so it'll be a little bit easier to work with, so we can pull these out really simply. So the only thing we're going to have to do now is over here on the app start, or the global ASX right here, we're going to want to register this so that they load. So to do that, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to call this here. Let's see, mapping. Actually, I put it somewhere else, huh? Oh, actually, it's going to be underneath mapping. There we go, mapping configuration. This is going to be global, so you only want to declare this one time. That's why I'm putting it in here. And then we're going to want to define it, and the type that was derived, I believe it was Cassandra mappings. Okay, so and then just do that, and there you go. Now it's going to be registered on startup, so that's good. So let's go ahead and double check. Yeah, we should be fine. Let's make sure we have no errors. Okay, everything's looking good. Okay, so probably next what we want to do is we want to go and get a controller for this. So let's go ahead and make a new controller. Let's make a class here. And let's go ahead and let's call it just blog controller. Okay, so in order to use it, we need to go ahead and derive from API controller. Let's put a constructor on here. And we're going to go ahead and make, since we're just going to be returning posts, let's go ahead and just make stub one out real quick, where we're going to do get all posts method here. And hopefully we're going to be returning back an OK with some data in it. Let's go ahead and decorate it. That's going to be an HTTP get, and that has a route name, and we'll just call it API slash post. That's what we'll call it. So anyways, we really need to return something here, so let's just do a return OK, just to make it happy for now. Okay, so now we need to start filling in actually what we need to grab this data out of Cassandra, and we're going to do it on here, but this would not be the way you'd want to do it, building the application correctly. I would check out my GitHub that I showed a little earlier and do it that way using IOC container. But let's go ahead and let's get started, just kind of doing it all within this class right here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we need to get an instance of this iCluster. So let's actually stub one of those out. And right here in the constructor, let's go ahead and initiate it. So what we're going to need to do here is call construct cluster, and you'll need the information that we had before. You'll see that right now when we did our connecting via the command prompt. So we're going to need to add the contact point there, and we're going to need that same IP address. So let's go ahead and look at it again. So looks like it's going to go ahead actually and copy this here, paste it in there, but we're not going to put the port in here. Okay, instead we're going to have to put with port. Okay, and then at the very end of that, what we're going to want to do is we're going to call build. Okay, now that that takes an integer because it's a port, and there you go. So you need this. So the next thing also that we're going to need is we're going to need a session object. So let's see, I make sure this is the right one. Yes, iSession instance. And to do this, we're just going to actually do, we're going to actually go through the cluster here object, and we're going to do connect, and we're going to specify here our key space that we created. And if you remember, we called our key space, if we go back here, we called it, we see here we're in the blog key space, so we need to get back in there. So this would be our blog key space. Then the next thing we need to do here is we want to go ahead and make a IMapper reference. These are all, like I said, provided through the Cassandra driver. And we're going to want to go ahead and do a mapping here. So let's do a new mapper. And in here, we're going to want to pass in as a session object there. And so now that we have that, what we should be able to do pretty simply now is be able to go ahead and return these results. So let's go ahead on this method down here. Let's go ahead and let's say list of posts, and what we're going to do is make this and call the mapper that we declared up above, and we're going to do a fetch of type will be the one that we just did, the post. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in that namespace. And it's pretty much that simple. So all we need to do now is return the list of posts here, and it should fetch all of them. Let's to list them. So let's go ahead and hope that this works the first time. So let's go ahead and launch it in Google Chrome. Actually, what I'll do instead is I'm actually going to use Postman, which is just an extension, you know, you can get from Google Chrome. So you can just go to your extension manager on Google Chrome. You can install this. It just makes testing your RESTful APIs a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and use it while I wait for. Okay, so I think, okay, it looks like it's up and running. So let's see if now what we can do is we should be able to, using a get, be able to connect to the RESTful API launched above, and it looks like here for the route I made it API/post, and what I'll do is I'll put a page break in here before I execute it. So you'll see here we're doing a get. Let's go ahead and send. Oops, so it looks like I deleted some of the stuff that, let me go ahead and get rid of some of these things here. It never works the first time, so let's see. So because I deleted all the scripts because we're not building anything, I'm just going to delete all this since we're just building an API. And I might want to go double check to make sure that, so I'm not going to need this anymore. I won't even need that anymore either. Let's go ahead and run this again. Okay, so it looks like it's up and running. Let's go ahead and hit send on Postman again. There you go. So it's a little slow, but it happened. So let's go ahead and step into this. Okay, it looks like we have a little bit of an invalid query, so we got to go ahead and look to see why it's doing this. And if you actually read the information that was given right here, it sees that the name doesn't map because I believe in the queries here we have post ID, and I believe on our object we actually, so I actually missed that when I was creating it, the class. So actually we can go ahead and fix this in the mapping. I did not do this on purpose, but I'm glad I did now. So if I go here now to the Cassandra mapping, we can go ahead and use that extra thing here. So we should be able to do with name. So this would be post ID. So that should go ahead and do the mapping for us. Let's go ahead and launch it again. And you can unit test this code, which is really cool. So you can catch that before you actually try and executing like I did. Okay, so that's up and running. Let's go ahead and send the request in. Okay, so we hit that breakpoint again. And this time it actually goes through. So let's go ahead and hit that, hit continue. And let's go ahead and look at our Postman, and you see we got data. So that's coming straight from them. So we're going to hit it again. It's going to hit that one more time. Turn it to double make sure that was what we expected there. So there you go. It's actually that simple to get started with Cassandra and ASP.NET Web API. It's not as difficult as I thought it was going to be. A lot harder, and in fact it's pretty simple. I highly recommend that. I'm going to bring this link over here, that you check out this page provided by DataStax. They're the guys who built the driver that I'm using in this demo. But if you kind of read this one article, you can see how easy it is to work with their driver in a pretty familiar format that we are all used to using as ASP.NET developers. So I hope this is really helpful for you guys. If you have any suggestions or anything I can do to improve these videos, please let me know. And I hope you learn a lot from this. Thank you.